One last concept I want to demystify in terms of income taxes is the concept behind the Laffer Curve, which was an economist named Laffer that came with this concept. Why is there so much differences in viewpoints among politicians when it comes to the income tax rate? I remember being in the States one year and hearing a politician say, we should decrease the tax rate to increase tax revenue. For a lot of people, this sounds a little off. And if I ask the question, can he be right? I'm sure a lot of people would say, no, this is impossible. Well, actually, it's not completely impossible. It doesn't mean that it's true, but it's not impossible. So what we're going to undergo here is a Laffer curve analysis. Okay. So to understand this, I'm going to set up a diagram where I include two main concepts and the relationship between the two. So what I'm interested in seeing is the relationship between the income tax rate. So this is income tax rate. Could go from 0 to 100%. Can't be more than that. And this is my tax revenue. Okay. So if I think about the relationship between tax rate and tax revenue, there's a few spots or a few things I could start highlighting. Even without knowing how this country works or other things, you can have a good idea of what this could look like. Okay. So is there a point that we know on this graph with certainty? Well, one point that we know on this graph with certainty is this point that if you charge zero tax rate, you will have zero income tax revenue. Like if there is no income tax, well, naturally there'll be no income tax revenue. So here, once again, just to be clear, I guess this is my income tax rate and this is my income tax revenue. And here, just to kind of keep it simple, let's assume we have a flat rate tax system, so with a constant marginal tax rate. Yeah. Doesn't really matter though. So this is a point that we know. Another point that we could expect, we don't know with certainty, but we could kind of expect, is if there's an income tax rate of 100%, like let's say you decide to work overtime, or you decide to work at all, you work 40 hours a week, and all the money that you goes to income taxes, unless you're really nice to society, or you don't need money, I doubt you would do it. Okay, so at 100% income tax rate, we don't have a crazy amount of income tax revenue. We actually have pretty much no income tax revenue, so it'd be somewhere close to zero because no one would work. No one would see the purpose of working. So then in between the two, we could think that as you have a 1% income tax rate, 2%, it's going to start going up in my tax revenue. But if it's going to go down like this, it's not going to go up, 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 and boom, drop in one go. Like at 95% income tax rate, probably the working amount is going to be very low as well. So we could expect it to have some sort of shape like this. Whether it goes up more gradually and then goes down more rapidly, we don't know with certainty, but we know it's going to have this kind of shape. And we don't expect it to start going up and back down and up and back down. It wouldn't really make much sense. So it's going to have some sort of shape like this. And some sort of shape like this has one maximum point. So over here, I could think this is where my income tax revenue is maximized. Okay, so we have this point here. And associated to that point, there's going to be a tax rate which maximizes my income tax revenue. So there's this optimal tax rate if my goal is to maximize income tax revenue. So we have this relationship. And you'd explain this relationship to just about anyone, and most people would believe you. And no one would really argue this. So why is there arguments between the Democrats and the Republicans in the States, where you have the Democrats that want to drop the income tax, want to increase the income tax rate, and the Republicans that want to drop it? If their goal is to maximize income tax revenue, it's not always the case that they want to increase or drop it. But if they believe in increasing income taxes, one will say to increase it, and some may say to drop it. So what's the reason behind this? Well, the reason behind this is based on where do we think we are? Do we think we are currently over here at, let's say, spot A? Or do we think that we're over here at, let's say, spot B? In both of these instances, I have the same income tax revenue. But on one spot or the other, it's quite different. On this spot here, it would tell me that if I wanted to get higher income tax revenue, I would have to increase my income tax rate. People are not taxed enough just yet if our goal is to maximize income tax revenue. On the other side here, it says that if I were to increase taxes, we would end up with much less tax revenue because business would go out of business, less people would work, and we'd have a situation that people would work less at this higher income tax revenue, businesses would leave, and so on and so forth. So the actual income tax generated, revenue generated, would be lower. Okay. So if I think of these two spots, well, since we don't know if we're at point A or if we're at point B, you have to think that some that believe that we should increase income tax revenue think we're over here if our goal is to maximize income tax rates. So this would be where Democrats would say that we are in the States. I would say that if you want to increase tax revenues, you have to increase the income tax rate. And over here is where certain Republicans say we are. They believe that right now the American system is overtaxed. And if we tax it more, we're just going to hurt the economy more. So we actually want to decrease the income tax revenue so that we can increase income tax rates. So it all depends where we are. It may be true that we're here, but most economists would actually say that we're on the left-hand side here, that if we wanted to maximize income tax revenues, we would have to increase the income tax rate. It's not necessarily always the goal is to maximize income tax revenues. There's a lot of other goals by the government. But if that was the goal, this would be the situation. Okay. And just to kind of say that this situation cannot always happen, that we want to drop income tax rates to get to zero, to increase income tax revenues, there's a certain limit to it. So even though some Republicans would say, oh, I'll move this way and I'll keep moving, well, I wouldn't keep moving all the way to 0% income taxes, basically based on what is in this simple caricature. If it's simple, the lower the tax, the greater the economic activity, the higher the tax revenue. So then the other person says, then we could lower the tax rate to 0 and we'd be deficit free in no time, meaning that we're going to have so much tax revenues if we lower the tax rate to 0. Well, this is false. Naturally, here we could see that even if we drop it, if we're on this side, we drop income tax rates, we might hit that maximum point. But if we keep dropping income tax rates, one thing's for sure is that income tax revenues will fall. Okay. So it all depends where we currently are in the country that we're in and so on. But depending on where we are, we'll either have to increase or decrease income tax rates to maximize income tax revenue. All right.